This video is sponsored by OneFootball. If you need a new football app on your phone, OneFootball is the place to go. You can select Celtic as your favourite team, and that'll give you all the latest Celtic news, transfer speculation, fixtures, and even live match updates if for any reason you can't make or watch a game. You can also add widgets to your home screen to keep up to date with Celtic's next fixture, who it's against, what the kick-off time is, all that stuff. And you can track leagues from across the world, league tables, top goal scorers, you name it, you'll find it all there on the OneFootball app. You can download it by clicking the link in the description of this video. It's free, absolutely free, wherever you get your apps on your phone. And it's a great way to support Celtic Fans TV. So if you haven't downloaded it already, please click the link below and get involved.
Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Celtic Fans TV. I'm Stuart, as a lot of you will know. I've been doing quite a lot on the channel this season, and joining me, I do have a Paul, but it's no our Paul. This is Paul MacDonald. He is a seasoned veteran of the European football scene, and it's time for us, after yesterday's sensational performance at Celtic Park, to look ahead to the mighty Real Madrid, the final European giant that we haven't had the chance to slay at Celtic Park, coming to our fortress to see what we can do. How are you doing, Paul, today?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Aye, not too bad, man. I think let's start off just so if folk want to know a bit about you and a bit about your background, how you get into writing about Real Madrid and Spanish football and European football in general.
So my first season covering La Liga was for Goal.com in 2008, which, if memory serves me, was Pep Guardiola's first season at Barca, which was a pretty good season to cover. That was the Eto'o, Henry, Messi front three that season. And that was the season before Florentino Perez came back and spent all the big bucks on Benzema, Ronaldo, all that money. So it was that weird transition where Barca were eminently one of the best teams in the world that season, and then the season after, Madrid had to spend all the money in the world to try and compete with that team. And then Mourinho arrives, and it was just a great time to be covering it. So I was covering it part-time initially, and then 2010 I moved into Goal full-time to become the La Liga correspondent for the season. And that
Goal.com, the website, aye.
Yeah. And that 2010-11 season was the one where there was 4 Clásicos in 17 days in the March-April period, which was probably the most intense working period I've ever had in my puff, man. It was crazy stuff.
I can imagine, man.
That was the semi-final where Messi scores one of the greatest goals ever at the Bernabeu, and then they played each other in the Copa del Rey final and all. They played each other in a league game, and then obviously the second leg of the Champions League. So crazy times, but the best time to be covering that sport. And the stories and the angles at that time were great as well. Valencia had a really good team. They had David Silva, David Villa, Juan Mata, and all that. It was a really good league and great thing to cover. And it just became, and stayed my league ever since. Watch it most weeks. Try and catch Barcelona and Real Madrid every week that I possibly can, watching them live, and then any other games I can catch. I've always had a soft spot for Villarreal. Ever since Riquelme went there and Diego Forlan and stuff like that, I've always looked at it for Villarreal. And I know Celtic obviously have got a good relationship with Villarreal over the years when the times have played them, and folk have always said nice things about going to visit and stuff. So really well run club as well there, Villarreal. Do you know what I mean? Like good atmosphere, good fans, about like a really good business model and that. Anyway, off at a tangent.
No. Villarreal's fine, because like I love the story of them. Obviously, they've built El Madrigal, the stadium, up a wee bit now, but small textile town. They built the team on the success of a Romanian striker, Craioveianu, way back in 1998.
Good knowledge, man.
It's all right, mate. That was when I stayed in Spain. So my Spanish team's Granada. But when I was in Spain, they were in sort of the very much the lower portion of their pyramid, and then they obviously get backed by the Pozzo money, and that kind of changed. But sticking with the key subject matter, I think the very interesting thing is, for us over here, Celtic are now like, right, okay, let's have a look at that Champions League group. Real Madrid, Leipzig, Shakhtar Donetsk. First thing I'd ask you, just before we get into the nuts and bolts of Real Madrid, is, do you think that's a good draw for Celtic? Do you think we've got a good chance of getting through it?
I think it's one of the best draws that Celtic have had, actually, in recent years. If you look back at some of the the Cities and the PSGs and all that, where even going back to Martin O'Neill's days when Bayern Munich, Milan and all that in the one group, and Shakhtar at that time, obviously with the war and stuff like that Shakhtar team back then were really strong. This one, we don't really know what to expect that much because they've not played that much football, do you know what I mean? And they're certainly obviously not going to be playing in the home stadium. So as much as it's difficult circumstances, it's a good situation for Celtic to be in because I think it's going to be in Warsaw, the away game, I believe.
That's correct.
And then obviously at Celtic Park, so that's a good chance to pick up some points. And in Leipzig, you could argue a team still in transition. Obviously, Werner's went back there, but they're still a club that's predominantly got a selling model. So the guys are trying to put themselves in the shop window. No started the season very well in Germany either, but they still got talented players. That and Kunku up front, I really like him, and then Werner's obviously getting back into the swing of things. But in terms of teams you could have got in that section, I think it's a really good draw. And as you say, like my brother, my dad, or Celtic Daft and all that, any time that the draw came about, they wanted Real Madrid because they'd had enough of Barca over the years. They wanted to say that they played Real Madrid at Parkhead, and that's obviously came around. So I think a Celtic fan perspective, I don't think you could ask for much better.
No, that's exactly the way I think a lot of fans are looking at it. And in terms of, so you're always looking at the Champions League with two kind of sets of eyes. One is what's the glamour ties you could get, and then the other side is can we get a group that we have a chance in? And I mean, personally, I'd be disappointed with less than third in that group, even though I appreciate that these teams are very, very good teams. Leipzig, because of their domestic struggles, may well go right. Let's have a right good go at the Champions League, and Tedesco, the manager, will probably be saying, right, we've got to really show something in Europe, because they're expected to compete at the top level in the Bundesliga now, hence Champions League qualification. And then Shakhtar, it's just such an unknown. But we're here to talk about Real Madrid, and I think it's interesting because you're obviously, firstly, you're talking about the champions of Europe, and I don't have offhand the amount of times that Celtic have been in the Champions League and drawn the reigning champions, but it's definitely happened a few times before, and it has happened again that we have them coming calling at Celtic Park. But this is a game that's been 50, 60 years in the making, you know. Like this is a clash between, obviously we know the way that money dominates football now, and Scottish teams are very much struggling to compete at that top level, just because of the discrepancy with the financial aspects of it. But I suppose we could start there. Financially, there's obviously been a lot made of what's happening at Barcelona. What's the situation off field financially at Real Madrid? Are they in a slightly more sustainable position at the moment, or is there? Because I noticed that their stadium construction has been delayed by a year. That's reduced Celtic's allocation to all intents and purposes for this Champions League game, which is a right gutter. But in terms of their position financially and their position as a club, how is that? How sustainable a footing are they on right now?
So the season before COVID came, and I think one of the Premier League teams this summer has beat it. I think Chelsea have beat it, but the summer of 2019 was the biggest single spending summer by any club in European football history. They brought in Luka Jovic, Hazard was a big transfer splurge that summer, and it's fair to say that they signings didn't go particularly well for them.
Not at all.
So the combination of COVID coming in, and also the fact that they were always planning to go after Mbappe this summer. So they kept their powder clean for a wee bit in summer of 2020, and then 2021 they brought in Camavinga, but they really didn't spend anywhere near as much as you're accustomed to a Real Madrid spending. So they were, as far as Real Madrid is concerned, quite prudent with their spending. And obviously you mentioned the stadium. The stadium was a necessity because the big problem that the Bernabeu and Camp Nou, in fact, have got is they just don't have enough of the executive seating that can generate the big bucks for Champions League games and Clásicos and stuff like that. So that's why they've basically built in a full extra layer into the Bernabeu's new project that's, I don't know, $5,000 a box or whatever they charge. That layer where they can charge that amount of money. Camp Nou really doesn't have any facilities like that either. So Real Madrid are taking a step forward away from Barcelona in terms of this new futuristic stadium, multifunctional. I'm sure you've seen the clip during the week of the pitch getting rolled in and out. It's mesmeric, man. Like it's rolling out for gigs and venues and all that. So they've had kept their powder clean because of that crazy summer that they had, and then also the stadium work that's ongoing and obviously get delayed by COVID. But because of that, their model is a bit more sustainable for the future. They're a bit more long-term thinking there, whereas Barcelona, the disaster that was Bartomeu's reign, all the money that they spent there and the wages and the crazy wage bill that they built up, it's led to the situation they're in right now where, quite frankly, I don't know how they're getting away with half the stuff they're doing. And that's a completely other podcast that Barca are up to. But certainly Real Madrid, what they've done really well is they've built succession plans in a lot of key positions, and one of which was Casemiro. Now, I think Casemiro in particular is one of the most underrated players in the game. I think he is the unsung hero of that team that won Champions Leagues back to back to back. And I think
this is the key. This is the key. He got sold to Man United in the summer, and I think what was one of the most baffling transfers of the window. I think a lot of people looked at that and went, "What has gone on here?" Because Man United, in one hand, can't secure Frankie de Jong from Barcelona, who have no money, essentially, to all intents and purposes, are very much borrowed money. And yet Casemiro has gone from the European champions, where he was an integral part of that team, to Man United, which is a team that is looking to rebuild itself to the real top echelons of the game. So what happened there?
Frankie de Jong didn't want to live in Manchester, as far as I'm led to believe. He loves living in Barca. Obviously, there's a massive element of Frankie de Jong deferring his wages, which he did last summer. Now, he's not going to walk out on 18 million euro or whatever it was, and Barca just couldn't come to an agreement with Man United to make that money. Somebody to pay it, whether Man United paid it or they paid it to get rid of him, whatever. It just didn't work out. So that's why de Jong didn't go. Casemiro just basically told Real Madrid they wanted a different challenge. And hell, Man United's a challenge and a half right now. So a good place to go if you want that. And the money that was getting offered was ludicrous as well, for a guy that's 30. And in fairness to Casemiro, I think one of the things that people are looking at is his age at 30. But in terms of guys that play that position, Casemiro was a bit of a late developer. He only actually started playing regular, consistent first-team football by the time he was 22, 23. So he's not got as much mileage on his legs as some of these younger guys have. So I've not really got any concerns of him still going at a very peak level for 2 or 3 years yet. I don't think that's a big worry. But Real Madrid, I will get to the squad depth in a minute, but they've got succession plans there. They've got guys that can play in those positions. So they didn't want to pay 350 grand a week or whatever that he's getting at Man United. Simple as that.
No, well, that's fair enough. And I think the point about age is an important one, because how many players do you see that break through at 16, right? We've got one of our own at Celtic at the moment in James McCarthy. James McCarthy isn't that old, but that boost in his legs is gone. You saw it with Wayne Rooney, that the pace faded earlier than it may have done had he broken through at 18, 19. Michael Owen was more injury disrupted, but I think Robbie Keane, there was an element of that as well. A lot of these players that break through at 16 years old, it just stops. And then, so obviously the inverse might be true. So that kind of traditional thing of you hit your peak between, say, 27, 31, 32, that's only for a majority of players. It's not a rule that's applicable to everyone. Yeah, and exactly. Some of them can go longer. And I think as well, particularly in that defensive midfield position, because there's so much yet is in the head, that if you've got that game intelligence, then, I mean, you saw with Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon had hardly any pace at all, but played the position magnificently well because he was such an intelligent footballer and knew where to be. And I think that's where, because obviously pace is the thing people look at, stamina and the engine. But I think Casemiro's got a few more miles in the clock yet. And that, there's no doubt that is a big, big loss to Real Madrid. But despite that, they've had a fantastic start to the season. And has that surprised you somewhat? Did you think that there would be disruption from his departure? Or are you quite... were you expecting them to start and sort of get out the traps quite quickly, building on that Champions League success, obviously?
Do you know, Madrid are just a funny team sometimes, man. They just... Their capacity to get it done is unparalleled in world football. Mm-hmm. They've conceded in every game they've played this season, right? And particularly the Almeria game away and in Espanyol last weekend, they didn't look as if they were going to get a result out of the games, and it took Alaba smashing a free kick in the top corner away at Almeria to get the win there. and then it was an 89th minute winner for Benzema at Espanyol last week. He got the points there. They just seem to get over the line. And I do agree, like, there is a transition here, because when you've got Casemiro, Modric and Kroos, right, the three of them just know, like, where each one is going to be in relation to the other on the pitch. And you can't buy tactical awareness like that. You're talking about three of the most experienced guys in the game, right? But you've taken Casemiro out, and Tchouaméni has played every game in the DM position, right? €100 million midfielder, right? So we're not talking about a mug here, right? He's slotted right into that gap, and he's actually played really well, considering he's just getting used to his surroundings. But that level of telepathy between him and, say, Kroos and Modric and Casemiro it's just not there at full capacity yet. Furthermore, Ancelotti's mixing up a wee bit, so like he's usually in the league this season either playing one or either of Modric and Kroos, and Camavinga's playing a bit more minutes. Valverde's playing a bit more minutes. I think Ancelotti's decided this season that the legs on Kroos and Modric means that both of them can't play together every week, particularly in away games where there's a bit more intensity involved. So he's mixing it up, and Camavinga's playing a bit in there. Valverde's playing a little bit in there, just to mix up the options. I mean, it's no bad options to have. Like, I've got a lot of time for Valverde as a player as well. Really good. So there's a bit more transition. In fact, he's mixed the midfield up in all 4 games they've played this season. Tchouaméni being the constant in the DM position, but the other two have rotated quite a bit. So that with that comes just adjusting to everybody, just adjusting to each other. It's taken Camavinga best part of 18 months to get used to a starting position in this team and his position in relation to those other guys, and he's still getting used to that. So that's potentially an opportunity for Celtic in the middle of the pitch. The fact that there isn't that level of telepathy and understanding of that unit yet, just because they're chopping and changing a little bit, and everybody's getting used to these new guys that are slotting in. So that's an area of the pitch where they're not weak, because all the players are world class, but just that level of just knowing where your teammate's going to be and knowing where a guy is going to be, that takes weeks and months to build up, and they've just not got that in that position yet.
It's interesting. Celtic do seem to have, even with the new players that have come in, there seems to have been a very, very quick transition and adaptation in terms of them fitting together. And the central midfield area is as strong as Celtic as it's been in my lifetime in terms of depth. Celtic have so much depth and quality in that position right now. I think it might be interesting for people. So I had a wee look just at their team that played in the win over Betis at the weekend. They won at home, goals from Vinicius Junior, surprise, surprise, and Rodrigo, who has started the season really well. And I think the Spanish papers were saying he's kind of served his apprenticeship, if you like. So I think it would be interesting if we quickly go through that team. So it's the back five, including the goalkeeper, that did such a great job of shutting Liverpool out. I mean, obviously, Thibaut Courtois put in one of the performances by any goalkeeper in a European final, arguably the best ever, to win that final against Liverpool. But I think defensively as a whole, they were just so impressive. And it's that back line of Courtois in goal, Dani Carvajal at right back, so much experience, Eder Militao, and then David Alaba, who nowadays is a centre-back. It's as if he's played every position on the left-hand side or spine of the team, you know, like he's throughout his career, just such a versatile operator, such an intelligent footballer. And then you've got Mendy at left-back as well, who was always going to be the long-term successor to Marcelo. Marcelo's now departed Real Madrid. I think a few fans that maybe haven't watched Madrid in a few years would maybe still be thinking Marcelo was there. But talk us through that back line. Talk us through how because you say they've conceded in every game this season, and we're thinking of them as this resolute defence. But I mean, looking at Celtic, looks like Kyogo's going to miss the game, so probably Yakimakis will play. I know that you're quite familiar with Celtic's weapons up front. Do you think we have the ability to create problems for that defence, or do you think it's going to be a tough nut to crack?
The interesting battle for me in that is probably Carvajal against Jota on that side. Carvajal was one of the great attacking fullbacks in the modern game. I don't think he's a very good defender, and I've never really rated him going the other way. And there was a couple of times in the Champions League last season where he got a doon handed to him, quite frankly. And I think that could be an area that Celtic can exploit, especially with a guy as talented as Jota playing off that wing. That could be an area where they can really make hay. In the middle, you're talking about a guy, Antonio Rudiger, who was one of the best defenders in Premier League last season, who might well play in this game. I don't know. Like they've they've switched those around a little bit this season as well. Alaba dropped out at the start of the season, and then Rudiger played. Militao's kind of been the constant, but those other two have rotated a few times, so he might just go with that back four, but he might want to play Rudiger in there. Who knows? I mean, it's a great option to have. I think Rudiger's a fantastic athlete, fantastic player as well. So it's not entirely clear yet which certainly half pair they might go with. Mendy's almost certainly going to play on the left, but obviously Alaba can play on that side as well. But I would expect Mendy to play in there.
Well, I was going to say, is there a chance they might plug Alaba into certain other areas of the team potentially? Because obviously he has the versatility to do that. So I'm wondering, he could maybe slot to left back. Is there a chance they maybe even move him forward into midfield?
I don't think so.
No chance of that?
Not at the moment. Shumani's played Shumani came off the bench at Almeria on the first game of the season, and he's played the 90 in the 3 league games since in the DM position. So I think that he's pretty much locked in to play there. What happens with Modric and Kroos is really up to Ancelotti. He sees them as like kind of your prime pieces you can drop in whenever you need them. Like he might want to bring on Kroos late in the game if they want to keep the ball, or if they're under pressure, he may want to start with those two, then bring Camavinga on and close the game down. He's got a lot of options in there, and it's not really, it's hard to second guess what he's going to do with him at the moment, because Modric, 36 now, I think, and Kroos is a bit younger, obviously, but he's got a lot of miles on the legs, because he broke into that Bayern team at a very young age as well. So he's just trying to manage these guys effectively. But I don't think Ancelotti's going to be under any illusions that this is one of the most intense atmospheres that some of these guys have played in. Like Tchouaméni, with the greatest respect to Monaco, do you know what I mean? It's not exactly a bouncing stadium every week, is it, right?
No.
He's played 4 league games in Spain where Madrid have dominated the ball in the 4 of them, without coming under too much pressure high up the pitch. It's not the type of way that Celtic might do. I mean, whether Celtic can do that as well with Giakoumakis in there and not Kyogo, it remains to be seen. We didn't really get to see that yesterday because Rangers were so poor at the back of it for a lot of the game. We didn't really see the difference in intensity when Kyogo was off, but it'll be interesting to see if Giakoumakis... What do you think? Do you think Giakoumakis is capable of doing that as well as Kyogo does?
No, not as well as, because simply Kyogo's got that burning pace that allows him to do it. I think the interesting selection for me is, so you mentioned about Jota coming off the left, obviously he's right-footed player coming off the left. I mean, he might start with him on the right-hand side. He might start with him on the left-hand side. He might look at Danny Carvajal, as you say, one of the best attacking fullbacks in Europe on his day. Whether he's still on his day, I don't know. That's maybe up for debate. And I should say, he did play defensively really well against Liverpool in the final when it mattered. It was one of his better games that way. But Carvajal, he might look at that and say, I want Dyson Maeda, who's so good at coming back and covering runners and has such pace to do that. He might even go, Dyson Maeda played as a striker in Japan. He might get him just so that the intensity, the press is there and the same pace is there, and get him to play that role to put the defenders under pressure. But I imagine it will be Giakoumakis due to his goal return, due to the level of performance he's put in. I think at most teams he would be first choice striker up front. I think it's just because the Ange Postecoglou style is what it is that Kyogo is, and I think he was trying to very much embed that as the first choice system. I don't think it was just like, oh, we're playing Ross County away in the league, we're just going to play Kyogo because he fits this game. I think he was trying to ingrain that, and it's just very unfortunate that this injury has come when it did. But I think Giakoumakis, in terms of the press, maybe not, but in terms of teams playing out for the press, you would imagine that Real Madrid have the ability to do that. So I think the question is more, what different alternative kind of problems can Giakoumakis cause for these defenders? Because I think he's got a physicality that they maybe will not tend to face so often, because there's not that many Spanish teams, at least to my knowledge, have strikers of that ilk and that like to play in that kind of semi-nasty way that Giakoumakis does. And I think as well in Europe, there's just such an emphasis on pace now that I don't think Celtic are going to be trying to do what Rangers were doing yesterday and launching long balls and hoping to feed off the scraps of Giakoumakis. And I think he will press the Real Madrid defenders. But I think it's more about the problems he can cause in and around the box. and the way that he can back them up, that I think will be the interesting part. So in the phases of the game where Celtic do have a bit of control, it's whether they can get the service to him, and then whether he can finish the chances, or whether they can get goals for other areas. Because that's the great joy of watching Celtic at the moment, Paul, is like there is goals from every area of the team. Set pieces have been much better. What are Real Madrid like on set pieces?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Giakoumakis, because big boy Joselu, who plays for Espanyol, did he play in the Premier League? I can't remember. I think he might have spent a bit of time at
he did.
Maybe? Southampton, I think, maybe somewhere like that. Anyway, he's pretty similar in terms of build and style to Giakoumakis. Tall lad, good in the air. He scored and gave Madrid's defence a bit of a torrid time last week, and actually he's got a pretty decent record over the years against Real Madrid in terms of putting the ball in the net against them. So you're right in your assumption there. Like a guy like that going up against Alaba, who's not tall, brilliant on the ball, fantastic passing through the press, not a tall player at all. Militao's a big guy, but Giakoumakis, if he's smart enough, get in the gaps in between the two centre backs, try and hang yourself a bit more on Alaba, you'll beat him in there all day long. So if you're getting a period where you're pushing Madrid back into the final third, and you've got deliveries coming from either side, you would hope that Giakoumakis would give Alaba, at least if he's drifting back on him, be able to beat him in the air. I mean, the problem with Giakoumakis for me when I watch him is he's brilliant at getting into the positions to score the goals, but his ability to finish first time isn't always there. Like, he needs a couple most times to get that one over the line. And I think I mean, if you look at the one yesterday, right, you might get one of them again against a game against Real Madrid, right, and you need to be putting it in the net, because that was a guilt-edged opportunity, I think. And when he's come off the bench in other games this season at home, like, I think he's missed a couple before he's finally got the one in the net.
Aberdeen, definitely. But what I'm hoping is that he's done those misses against those teams and saved the finishes for the game against Real Madrid. And that is kind of sometimes the way it works with strikers. I think there's no doubt Kyogo Furuhashi is just a natural player. If you look at that goal he scored at the end of last season, I think it was against Motherwell, might have been against Hearts. It was over the shoulder and he hits it first time. Any professional footballer will tell you that's the hardest skill in football. And Kyogo Furuhashi made it look easy. Scored the hat-trick against Dundee United. But Celtic have got a lot of players in form going into this game. And I don't think you can take Lyle Abada out the team based on, 5 goals in 2 games. So maybe you're right. Maybe Jota does play on the left. Abada plays on the right. So that then begs the question to me. I did ask so I'll hit you with a double-edged one here. What are Real Madrid like defending set pieces? And then what are their fullbacks like if you can get inside them? Or are they quite good at tightening up?
I think there's opportunities at set pieces for Celtic definitely in this game. I think to put my XG hat on, mate, and I know nobody's that keen on that, but they are conceding 1 XG per game so far this season. So it's not like teams are picking up scraps against them and just putting away the only chance they get. They've conceded 1 in every game, but it's against an XG of 1, so it's largely been expected to concede those goals. And it's been scrappy ones in and around the box, throw in set pieces deliveries that have caused the majority of those goals. So for that point of view, I think there's an opportunity there for Celtic for sure. For the full-back perspective, Carvajal and Mendy will obviously want to push on as much as possible and to allow Tchouaméni to drop back in, just make a 3 at the back and push him up the pitch. But if you can get Mendy, if Abada can get Mendy and Vinicius on that side going that way rather than going that way, that's a massive attacking weapon that you're taking off him. Because like you talk about Rodrigo has served his time and stuff like that. I think Vinicius had done exactly the same for 2 years before that, and we saw the real Vinicius last season. And you've got a young guy now that's got so much potential and so much quality. But if the game's really no going his way, he can go missing still. He's still only a young lad. He's still only 21, right? So if the game's not opening up for him and he's not allowed to stretch the play and use his pace, he can drift in and out the game. So if Celtic can get the fullbacks pushed back in the opposite direction, get Mendy there, get Abada running there, and having Vinicius having to drop back in to double up to help out, that takes away an offensive weapon that they use really well and utilise a lot of the time. So I think that's something that would suggest to me a reason why Abada should play as well, because he can take them going that way rather than pushing back this way.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And then you've got Josip Juranovic, who's obviously a very, very talented defender. City rivals Atletico were sniffing around. And I think there was some substance to that particular rumour. that we heard during the window. If I look at it as well, I think the idea of Abada running inside, Juranovic on the outside, that's really good for Celtic for an attacking perspective. And then I also think back to Juranovic having Kylian Mbappe in his back pocket for Croatia when they played France, which I think bodes really well for Celtic in terms of neutralising the threat of Vinicius Junior on that side. But
the one thing I will say, but just from a Celtic perspective, I think they got a little bit sloppy in the second half yesterday, right? Which is understandable, right? Because you're winning 3-0, right? And the game's really in the bag. But
Rangers were awful. So you didn't. I think they were in second or third gear, Celtic.
But the two things that I noted were they took a foot off the gas a little bit, and I saw Mark Wilson making some comments today that should have went for the throat and whatever. No one you're playing Real Madrid on Tuesday night, for God's sake. You know what I mean? You want to manage the game, right? But two things. One, anytime Matt O'Reilly picked the ball from sitting in the midfield and he turned and he couldn't believe the 3 yards of space he had run about him to pick out passes and play the ball through Jota for the second goal in particular. He's not going to get that time on the ball and space on the ball against Real Madrid. And the second thing, I thought Hatate's passing was pretty sloppy for the 20 minutes before he went off. Celtic's ability to keep the ball for as long as possible is going to be integral to keeping Madrid away for their goal. That's going to be the first and foremost aim. And I know Ange's an attacking coach and he's going to want to go for it and try and win the game and score goals. But obviously, you can't have that tactical naivety to think that Real Madrid just won't pass through you. So I think having spells of possession on the ball and being brave on the ball to keep it is going to be one of the key components of the first 25-30 minutes. Keep the ball, keep the fans on side, keep the fans away from getting nervous, because if Madrid start pinging it about first 10-15, you know what it's like.
Right.
The boos lift up and people start to get a bit nervous. Keep the ball for a bit and just see how the game progresses. And it's those areas in the middle of the pitch, you can't be getting away sloppy passes against this team because Modric will tear you apart. So that's the one area where I think Ange's going to be telling these guys, be brave in possession, absolutely, right, and always look for the forward pass, but just try and keep the ball for as long as possible, because you don't want to begin running the merry-go-round with these teams for as long as possible, because you'll be bumped out by 75 minutes.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of those things where that is the area where the game is going to be won and lost for me, is how can Celtic manage to do that? And I think we stand a really credible chance if the team is able to be tidy in possession. And I think the level of opponent sometimes drags you down. And I think that Matt O'Reilly, I think that Rio Hatate and Callum McGregor has proved over the piece. You imagine that would be the first choice midfield three going into this game. And I think they have proved to everyone. McGregor has done it over time. And I think you've seen flashes from Hatate, and Matt O'Reilly is continuously improving to the point, and anyone who's worked with him, I was speaking to Russell Martin actually last night. He's manager at MK Dons. He's like, he's gone right to the top, mate. And that's the thing. People appreciate these things. And Celtic, I think, have the players for the first time I can remember in the middle of the park to actually maybe compete, especially if you can neutralise the threat of Luka Modric, which is the big challenge. Because if Luka Modric is able to start pulling strings, you mentioned Riquelme earlier in the chat, on one of the videos we did prior to the Champions League draw, we were kind of reminiscing about memories and stuff. I said best opponent performance I'd seen at Celtic Park was Juan Roman Riquelme, and it was because his ability to not even break into a jog and dominate the game. Luka Modric is slightly more mobile, but can do that as well. He's just so intelligent. But the last thing I wanted to come on to, just as we cover every area of the team, is the front three likely to be Rodrigo, Benzema, and Vinicius Junior, right?
I would assume so.
Aye.
He's dropped in. Fede Valverde's played on the right of the front three once this season so far, which kind of makes the team a 4-4-2. They kind of shift Benzema and Vinicius through the middle, and Valverde drops back a little bit to play on that right-hand side. But I don't think he'll do that here. I think Ancelotti, as much as possible, wants to play 4-3-3, and Rodrigo's in good form, as you say. So I don't see him going with Valverde in this type of game. I think he'll go with the two fast winners on either side. And Benzema's Benzema. Like he continues to be one of the greatest finishers ever to play in Spanish football.
He defies age. You know that rule we said, because he broke through as a youngster and is still just aging so well.
Aye, but I mean, he's the type of guy that like his ratio to chances created versus goals scored is just phenomenal. Do you know what I mean? Anything drops anywhere in the box and Benzema's scoring. The one weakness that Real Madrid have actually got is that if anything happens to him at all this season, and as you say, he's a supremely fit guy, right? So it probably won't. But if anything happens to Benzema, they don't have any adequate replacement through the middle whatsoever. They've got like Mariano Diaz is there, like can't lace Benzema's boots. Do you know what I mean? If anything would happen to Benzema, they'd really struggle because they just don't have another option through the middle, which doesn't help Celtic much here because he's definitely going to play. But that's the one weakness in the team is if anything happened to him, they'd be a bit of bother. And actually, at the other end of the pitch, we didn't really talk about Courtois. Courtois was unbelievable last season, and in fact, the season before that as well. Like I think he's world-class goalkeeper. Been a wee bit dodgy so far last season. The one at the weekend there, Canales scored for Betis on Saturday. Should have saved it. It's the kind of ones he was saving every week last season, and it went right through his body and that. So he's still brilliant, but maybe not as high as confidence as he was at the end of last season. So putting a bit of pressure on Courtois might make a difference. But I like Benzema. Like, what can you say? What can you say? Like he's tore apart better central defences than Celtic have got in the past. So
that said, this is a good Celtic defence, mate. I think, I mean, Starfelt might be, but I don't know what his injury situation is getting into the game yet. I've not had a chance to have a look at. But if it's Cameron Carter, Vickers and Moritz Jens, the key thing for me is, and this is, I suppose, less an issue against Benzema, but in general, in transition and in counter-attack sort of phases of the game, Celtic have pace throughout the team now.
Absolutely.
I think that's going to be a massive thing in terms of giving Celtic a chance to compete, not just in the Real Madrid game, but in the other games as well. If we do, because we will go forward and we will go, maybe not gung-ho, but we'll go out to attack. And we're going to get caught in the break. There's no doubt about that. But we have the players to get back. And I actually said in the post-match reaction video yesterday that my opinion is that Celtic's best work yesterday was actually defensively because they neutralised. I mean, Rangers had nothing anyway, right? But they neutralised any chance that Rangers had other than to fling crosses in. And Čolak kind of glanced one, and that was it. Right. You know, other than that, they tucked in really well. And it was almost like the defensive shape had been drilled ahead of the challenge that lies ahead. Don't get me wrong. Benzema and Čolak, come on, chalk and cheese. But that gives me hope that Celtic can go out and can maybe do something.
I honestly think the same, mate. Just to round off, I think the naivety that maybe we saw last season because of the personnel that Ange had available to him, I think that's been eradicated a little bit. I think he's got a far more structured team now. We have Hatate in there who's an absolute beast. McGregor able to do his thing, and Riley just with that one day foot. I think they've got a far better setup in there, and everybody knows their roles. I think the most interesting thing for me was the Ross County game last week. 10 changes he made or something like that.
Or the League Cup game,
yeah. League Cup game, but the structure of the formation just seemed to be natural to the guys that came in, and that's a hard thing to get. That takes time, and it's probably took him a season, and it's probably took him a full pre-season with these guys. Not having to worry about Champions League qualifiers and all that because they were automatically in. He could spend that time building a squad and working on stuff in training to get them ready for the big games, where he could structure the team and everybody knows their roles and their positions. And that's the most interesting thing to me, in that he's got options to play in there, but everybody seems to be well aware of what the tactics and formation are, and that's a marked difference with not only where Celtic were last season, but quite frankly where they were towards the end of the Rodgers era in Europe, where they just look tactically naive in a lot of the games. And I think this team is a lot more equipped to go out and give Real Madrid a right good game than any of those teams were.
I think Brendan Rodgers was always lauded for being a manager that was happy to have his teams go out and attack, right? But the thing was, he tried to counter press, which was his favourite buzzword, by the way, in the Parc des Princes. You know, I mean, it's not going to work. I think Ange's get the sense that if we lose possession, we get back into shape. And I think that's a really important factor getting into this. I think you saw flashes of the potential that Celtic have in the Betis away game and the Leverkusen away game. And obviously we're going into a home game against the biggest one of the lot, because it doesn't matter in all these debates about who the biggest team is. The team that's won the biggest one of them all 14 times is the biggest one. And the only one that's no come in the modern day to the absolute cathedral of football that Celtic Park is. So I suppose my final question to you would be, in Spain, how do they see this challenge? Because they've obviously seen Celtic have failed Barcelona on more than one occasion. Barcelona have come unstuck. Very good Barcelona teams as well have come unstuck against Celtic. How are they viewing this challenge for Real Madrid?
I don't think anybody wanted Celtic. In terms of how a draw can pan out for you, right? You've got away games and that where you might go and play good teams, right? But you're not getting subjected to the type of atmosphere that these guys will get subjected to on Tuesday. It just doesn't happen, right? It's a completely different ball game, and it's almost maybe a leveler than anything. And like I say, you've got young guys like Tchouaméni, exceptional footballer. He's not seen anything like this yet in his life, and that's an eye-opening environment to be put into. So I think that the talk in Spain was a bit disappointed with that draw. Certainly with this becoming the opening game. Do you know what I mean? You might want to go to Parkhead match day 5, match day 6 or something like that when there's some results under the belt and we can see how the group's panning out. Going in the opening day, all bets are off. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's proper, this is Champions League time, let's see what we can do. And I don't think Real Madrid are relishing going here first by any stretch of the imagination. Butragueño said similar stuff about the stadium and how the atmosphere is going to impact the players and stuff like that, and how it's one of the most iconic atmospheres in Europe, etc. So I think they're prepared for it, because obviously they are, because they've played in every conceivable arena in the world besides this one. But I really don't think that they're happy to be playing here as the first match day one. I think they would rather have went there. Well, I think they'd rather not went there at all, to be perfectly honest. But I think they'd rather have went there later in the group and maybe flipped the games about. So like, I think they would have rather have been Bernabeu at home first rather than Celtic Park. So they'll be nervous about it in that respect, and they know it's a difficult draw, but still world-class players. So
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but honestly, I do think that there is a chance for a Celtic team to go and do something really special. I do.
Do you think this is the best Celtic team you've seen going into a European campaign in a long time? Because I think a lot of us sort of feel like that.
I do feel like that. I feel that the team probably. Sorry, mate. I do feel that the team, the season that they were in with City, probably individually, that Celtic team were maybe the best individual team that's been about for a while, probably since Martin O'Neill's era. But collectively, as a unit, as we're saying about Rodgers, they were just tactically naive and set up in the way that Rodgers wanted to play, which, by the way, is still struggling with every week at Leicester now. Like, still doing the same things and making the same mistakes that he was at Celtic. So that's
looks like he has a shelf life as a manager, actually.
Absolutely.
Just kind of analysing it.
Absolutely, that's 100% my opinion as well. But maybe individually that team was more talented, but collectively this team, in terms of tactics, formation, and understanding what the manager wants of them, I think, like, playing this, you couldn't ask for a better draw. Match day one, getting about them, I think it's going to be an amazing occasion. And if you compare that to the draw to what Rangers have had, I think Rangers have got a really tough draw. Ajax, Napoli, Liverpool, that's 3 really tough games for them, particularly on the road. Whereas I think Celtic, on the road in particular, as I say, I'm not going to Ukraine, you're going to Warsaw, neutral venue for that game. Leipzig, not exactly the most strident fans in Germany, do you know what I mean, in terms of the games that you could go there and play. So that's not exactly an intimidating away game. So I think from that perspective, Celtic can be mature tactically in those games, and they're not getting faced with a cauldron atmosphere that Rangers definitely will in their away games. So I think there's a real opportunity here, and I think there's real cause to be excited about this one, because doesn't come in very often, games like this, man. So I think it's one to be enjoyed.
Indeed not. Right, prediction on where the game's going to be won and lost, and a scoreline and scorers.
I think if Celtic came out the box early, that's what we always say, in it, first 15-20 minutes, if they can keep the ball right and then just try and create chances and take those chances. I think they were pretty ruthless yesterday with that Giakoumakis chance aside. I think most of the other ones that came their way, the ball was in the net, and I think they're going to keep that up. If anything drops in the box, put it in the net and see how it goes. I think that's the ability to push that forward for as far into the first half as possible. will be a key deciding factor. If you get to 20-25 minutes and you've either missed a chance or you've not really had any chances, and Modric and Kroos or whoever plays starts to pull the strings and push you back, that's when it becomes a real testing point, because teams just don't do that to Celtic, obviously. They're the ones that keep the ball and they might not be as used to it. Although Rangers did have a lot of possession yesterday, in fairness. But I think that's the area. If Celtic can be ruthless and take their chances, I think they can get at least a draw out of this game. But again, it's about hitting them early and seeing if you can come flying out the blocks. And if they can do that, anything can happen.
Great words to end on. As you can see at the bottom of the screen on the ticker, myself and Paul from the channel, who's normally presenting these things. I'm sorry that you've had to make do with me today. We're going to be hosting a special live Twitter space at lunchtime on Tuesday, and that's at Celtic Fans TV on Twitter. And what we do in those spaces is we want fans to come and ask us questions directly, and it's a bit like a radio phone in, where you can phone in, you can make your point as the excitement builds and the nerves build. I mean, it's happening now. We've just beaten Rangers. Normally that's like the big event. You can just bask in the glory or something like that for a while, but already I'm thinking about Real Madrid and I'm like, so yes, we're going to be hosting a live Twitter space at 12:30 p.m. lunchtime on Tuesday. Join us for that. Come along and ask your questions. So make sure to do that. Thank you to Paul. We did have a Paul on the channel, just not the one that we're used to. But Paul, thanks a lot for your knowledge and your expertise, my man. Really enjoy it. What shirt's that you've got on, by the way? Because I keep trying to peg it.
It's the Hipster's Choice 1976 European Cup final, St Etienne's green jersey. They played Bayern Munich. So it's very much a classic football shirt.
It's a classic football shirt, and it's also in a Glasgow Derby weekend, politically neutral, given the colour.
Red, white, and blue here.
Brilliant. And then just before we go, troops, I would like to say, let's thank that man. Let's thank that man for what he's doing for our football club right now. Absolutely brilliant watching Celtic under Ange Postecoglou. Let's enjoy these days. And the next one is going to be an absolute cracker, a crackling atmosphere ahead on Tuesday night at Celtic Park. We'll have all the coverage building up to it and afterwards here on Celtic Fans TV. Thanks to Paul, and thanks to you all for watching. Hail, hail.